And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Super Inframan, Allison Cook, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so very much for your incredible support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I have with me Red Pill Junky.
Good evening.
And Super Inframan.
Hi, everyone. You
guys are a superhero team, apparently.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we're going to cover on the show tonight is some of this disclosure stuff that has come out in the last couple of weeks from Jeremy Corbell and such. And then we're going to wander the road a little bit. So who wants to start with that? Red Pill?
What's the deal? Disclosure happened. The world was changed forever thanks to James Corbell, and it's time to change our hobby, to something else, like fly fishing or something.
I sense sarcasm.
Mr. What's up, right?
There seems to be a heavy dose of sarcasm there. So what did Corbell release, and what was released by other people? I'm a little confused about this.
Okay. So, I guess all started back in December of last year when the Debrief, this new news website in which a few people that we know are involved, they first posted a story talking about encounters. One of those encounters of Navy pilots, seeing weird things while they are, piloting their jets. And there was this mention of two photographs that had been used for one of those secret briefings of members of the U.S. Congress. When they are briefed about, the UAP activity and whatnot. So among those photographs that were used in those briefings were one which allegedly showed what, according to the debrief, was some kind of like triangular object. Let's not even call it a craft. Triangular object, which apparently three bright lights in each corner. And there was even some kind of CGI reconstruction showing how the photograph would look like. And the photograph was apparently taken by the co-pilot of the plane using, a simple cell phone, an iPhone. And the other photo, what the mentioned was something that in the report or the briefing was called the cube. So, some kind of like object that kind of had the geometrical shape of a cube. So then, not long after that, something happened, and then the guys of the debrief were kind of forced to show a photo telling, this is the photo that we were talking about, it's finally being released. And people were saying, wait a minute, this is like the triangular object you were saying. This doesn't kind of look like the thing you were describing. You didn't even have the three white lights for starters. It kind of looked like a balloon, right? So these guys were like saying, "Oh no, wait! I think this is actually the cube." The other photo, which made it even worse because, I may not be an expert in avionics, but I know a thing or two about geometry, and I know the difference between a cube and objects that are not cube-shaped. So it made it even worse. And then, there were people who were saying, look, it kind of looks like a party balloon, and someone even managed to recover a photo of a balloon with the Batman, DC comic figure. And it kind of had the same shape. So that therefore it was nicknamed the Batman balloon, on social media. Okay, so let's go back to more recent events when I think it was George Knapp, using either his Mystery Wire website or his show on KLAS TV, mentioned other releases of these photos that were apparently part of the new UAP task force report that is supposedly coming next month, or in June 1st. And those photos, well, they mentioned the Batman photo, although in this case they were calling it the Acorn. The other was, I don't remember the name of it, but it also showed some kind of object that was kind of metallic reflecting, although it still, in my eyes, still looked like some sort of balloon.
Right.
It seemed to have sort of like a thing that was hanging from it, from the lower part of it, and another one that was called the Sphere that was kind of interesting, but to me it looked more like some kind of reflection. It almost looked like one of those orb photos that you see ad nauseam taken by amateur people who go to cemeteries and such. And they say, "Oh my God, there was so many orbs." And say, "Well, maybe there were just those particles that were gathered by the lens of your very crappy cell phone." And like I said, we have to remember these photos were not taken using advanced cameras attached to these military planes. They were taken using a commercial cell phone. Right. So now, with all of that, then Jeremy Corbell kind of joined the party, promoting this video about the pyramid and some kind of sphere, because this is something that happens in ufology, right? These guys, they get inside information. They never say their sources. They never provide the data for peers to check it out. And then Mick West, the famous skeptic and debunker, analyzed the video and concluded, and I think he's making a good point, that those quote-unquote pyramids are nothing but regular airplanes and stars that are flying overhead, and they look like triangles because of the something else called bokeh or bokeh. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's produced by some kind of distortion of the aperture of the lens of the camera. So we have all that, and on top of that, Tyler Rogoway posted a very lengthy but very good article on the Drive, basically stating or proposing that enemies of the United States are using drones and are using balloons in order to spy on American vessels, and using the UFO as a cover, because they know that the United States and Army personnel have a very crappy record on how to deal with unidentified flying objects. So basically, if what you're using to spy on Americans looks like a UFO, you're guaranteed that they will not pay attention to you.
And it's not a bad idea.
No, it's not.
So, I've been around aviation a little bit, and let me clarify just a little bit. I've got my private pilot's license and, worked with a small general aviation airport, some things like that. But there is certainly a stigma around saying that you see strange things in the sky, especially if you're a commercial pilot and there are people on board with you. it's a good way to mess up your career. So you don't say things about stuff like that. Now, if you see something out there and you want to make sure it's being picked up on radar, you do. Mm-hmm. And the other reason I bring that up about the radar, though, is a lot of these balloons and things or drone technology that's quite small don't really show up on civilian radar, to my knowledge. I was flying along one day at about 5,500 feet, little Swingle Sundowner was what it was called. It's a beach craft, kind of like a Cessna. And below me, not too terribly far below, but it's hard to tell distance, 3 hang gliders flew under me. And so I called to tower, which we would have called center at that point, where I was in my flight plan. And I was like, center, do you have anything flying under me? Just because I wanted to make sure that they knew there were hang gliders out there for any other traffic that was in the area. And they weren't showing up on the radar. So that tells you what can get away at different altitudes and what have you, and not show up on radar. They might think you're birds or something, but things that show up on radar that are manned typically have a transponder on it, and anything that you're operating, you want to make sure air traffic control knows about, probably uses some type of transponder technology too.
Right.
And so, and for listeners that don't know what a transponder is, it's a little box in the aircraft that you have a 4-digit code that is assigned to you when you take off, that sends that code back and forth to the towers to say, okay, this blip on my radar is not birds or a group of whatever. It's super inframan and red pill junkie, in an airplane.
In their super plane.
Yes, our super red plane at that.
So there's, drones. I mean, it's hard to say at this point what's drones and what's not, what's technology and what's not. I mean, we've talked about that before on the show. There were a couple of articles here I pulled to the side. Mm-hmm. One of them that I think Red Pill also sent me after I had already marked it was the attack of the drones, the mystery of disappearing swarms in the U.S. Midwest. And basically they had a bunch of drone sightings from December 2019 to January 2020. Residents of 3 states were perturbed by multiple sightings of numerous unmanned vehicles with wingspans of up to 6 feet flying between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. in grid formations. On the same night, Nebraska deputy reported seeing 30 to 50 drones in the sky. Witnesses were alarmed by the size and speed of the vehicles. It got to the point that we were fixing the take-up arms, says Mike from Linden, Colorado, who wishes to retain partial anonymity. It says they kind of just disappeared after a while, and no one was taking responsibility. There was an investigation by the FAA, the FBI, the U.S. Air Force, and nobody was claiming responsibility for the drones. Some people said it was just like a what's it called? I lost the word.
Mass hysteria.
A what?
Mass hysteria?
Yeah, mass hysteria, yeah. The FFA did take the sighting seriously. It doesn't mean there wasn't sort of a frenzy. On the 29th of January 2020, Vice reporter Aaron Gordon published an article claiming the mysterious drone sightings were a classic case of mass hysteria. In an earlier article, he stated that the Colorado Department of Public Safety flew a multi-mission aircraft for nearly 5 hours in Colorado on the 6th of January that year and found no suspicious drone activity. Johnson calls the Vice article shoddy, but Tingy concedes that some of the sightings could have been hysteria, particularly after the drones made national news. Some officials even became a little hysterical. The deputies in Nebraska reported finding space potatoes after chasing drones through a field. In actual fact, the lumpy brown objects were a farming product used to fill the irrigation ruts in the fields.
I actually covered this story last year at the Daily Grail. Mainly, one of the reasons that interested me is because I saw some peculiar correlations between these modern drone sightings and the ancient airship sightings
Yes.
that were reported in the late 19th century, also in the Midwest, and particularly how the media treated these events. You know, how, like you just said on this article by The Guardian, how some people began to say, oh, it was just mass hysteria. There were never any drones, which is kind of like insulting to all the people who actually saw drones and say, no, they were just seeing planes, or they were just seeing stars, because these people are hicks who can't tell, their toes from a rock on the ground. And it's interesting that at the Drive, again, Tyler Rogoway wrote another interesting article showing how the Air Force was actually taking these sightings very seriously.
Yes. And
there was all these memos going back and forth between different Air Force bases saying, hey, do you guys know who's flying these things? No, we don't know. It's not us. And so if you see this kind of like interest, especially because apparently these drones were very close to very sensitive installations, not just Air Force bases, but also, if I recall correctly, even nuclear sites, nuclear installations, then Rogoway's theory that someone might be using these to try to spy on American sensitive centers kind of like gains weight.
Yes.
Or even if you don't believe, you think, they're just using, Cold War hysteria, whatnot. It is interesting that the authorities are kind of like saying, well, the drones disappear, so I guess everything's okay, back to business, and nobody gives a damn who were flying these damn things.
Yeah.
Right. Which is kind of like reckless. Even if you consider how a drone can be, even a commercial drone, something that you can get in a Radio Shack, can be used as a weapon if you just have enough determination and enough tinkering, to try to weaponize it.
Well, Taylor mentioned that in the article as well, didn't he? I think he was talking about some of the stuff that ISIS had done, where they had taken some off-the-shelf drones and kind of made them capable of dropping bomblets. Now, I don't quite know what that entails, but it was probably 5 years ago. I wish I could find a source for this. I had read an article about civilian drone technology in relation to what the military has. And this guy was just talking about some of the stuff that they had been developing and saying that he thought they were about 10 years behind. This was a hobbyist with their homebrew programming and what have you from what the military was capable of. Mm-hmm. So let's say this is 5 years ago. Things developed exponentially. So they're probably not far off. And then if you factor in, another country that has interest in that, starting to like, I don't even have to develop all of this anymore. If I've just got some very able-minded people with computer engineering and some things like that, it really wouldn't be that hard, I don't think, to weaponize or use them for surveillance. We were talking a moment ago, I don't think that radar would pick them up very well. And, we've seen these shows for celebrations and concerts and things where they're flying in all these different swarms, making shapes in the sky.
Right.
This technology is very accessible. And so I think that Taylor's article is very accurate in the sense of like, do we know which one of these events was maybe another state spying on the U.S.? We don't. Are they trying to do this? I guarantee you they are.
It could also be, our government seeing what the reaction from the general public is going to be if they see these swarms of drones.
Very much so. Yes, I agree with that too.
The thing that kind of irked me about this article, it says, Mike says that claims of mass hysteria are frustrating, but then references ufologist and conspiracy theorist Milton William Cooper Asked if he himself identifies as a conspiracy theorist, Mike says, "No, I tend to vet pretty much every lead, and if I do not find credible evidence to support that lead, I won't push forward with it." 5 minutes later, he begins discussing footage of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Take the frame-by-frame footage of the towers coming down and compare that to a controlled demolition. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of unanswered questions for 9/11. So trying to marginalize it by saying, well, he also thinks there's problems with 9/11, it's like, oh, so we shouldn't take him seriously because he thinks that it might have been a controlled demolition.
Yeah, I guess that was the left-wing writer from The Guardian couldn't help himself or herself trying to make fun of these conspiracy types that actually get obsessed with stories about UFOs and such.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't appreciate that either because, I think a lot of us in the United States all have different suspicions about 9/11, and trying to use that to invalidate everything else a person says is really disingenuous.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has some kind of theory about that, and I think everybody's suspicious in one way or the other about 9/11 in some way.
Yeah, well,
to different varying degrees, of course,
right?
But
right,
that's not. I don't think that's a fair way to invalidate anything that Milton had to say.
I heard a podcast where this guy was debunking 9/11 conspiracy theories by talking just to average people on the street who didn't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd find people who said, yeah, it's probably a conspiracy. And then he'd find out they really didn't know much. They just heard, bits and pieces on the internet. And he then used that to completely dismiss all conspiracy theories about 9/11. And I'm like, wow, that's really disingenuous, but okay. Good for you, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's like you obviously went in with a predetermined thing that this is all nonsense, and you found the people to back it up.
Exactly. And, it couldn't possibly be that there are people out there that have researched it and have reasons for thinking the way they do about it.
Yeah.
And I won't get into my own theories about that, but I do have some, but I'd like to keep those to myself for now.
Sure.
But this is one of those things that is my criticism of larger media too. We go find the people that make our argument look the best, and then we go find the people that make our argument look the worst. And I'm saying this as if I were putting a news story together, so I can invalidate the counterpoint against what I'm trying to put on as a story.
Yeah,
sure. Although, I mean, it is fair to say that now that we live in a post-9/11 world, the level of distrust towards the government in American society is in an all-time high. I mean, it's never before have we seen American citizens not willing to believe anything that their elected representatives tell them. So in this environment, we are also adding UFOs into the mix. So it is even a bigger mess than what it used to be. I don't know, in the old days of NICAP, when NICAP were among the few people who were saying, "Oh, the government is not telling us the truth about UFOs." And I guess back in those days, the sentiment about the average American citizen is saying, "Well, these NICAP guys are fools because I trust my government. I like Ike." Or something to that effect. And now, like 50, 60 years later, it's the other way around. It's like, and I could even say, that I myself, when I hear the younger members of the UFO community saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see this UAPT task force report is going to be great. Finally, we're going to learn the truth about UFOs." And I happen to be the guy saying, "Well, now you're going to believe something that came out of the people who have been lying about the UFO phenomenon for decades, but now it's going to be different because now they're going to tell you what you are expecting." if you're lucky, because now it seems I have my suspicion that this task force report is going to be a big nothing burger that is going to say something to the effect of, yes, we have encountered evidence that there are drones or there are unmanned aerial vehicles that might be controlled by hostile forces to the United States. So we need to reinforce our vigilance, and we need to reshape our strategy, and we need to encourage our enlisted personnel and our pilots to report these kind of sightings because there might be, a new threat. And maybe a few paragraphs saying, and we also had a few cases that remain unidentified, but that's not important.
Right.
So, Red Pill, here's what I'm curious to hear your and Seriah's thoughts on. And I kind of mentioned this in a message to you guys, and we were talking about some other stuff, though. But do you think that they will be able to keep a unified message about this going forward? Because obviously the idea that these are drones is trying to cover this loophole or oversight that we were just talking about, allowing, other states the potential to spy by making something look like a UFO. So if you're trying to kind of mitigate that, do you think that they'll be able to keep that up as a general action, or do you think that sometimes you have one group says, we're going to go forward with this idea that everything is a drone, and then somewhere else they're going to deny everything, and another place they're going to laugh at you because you said UFO or you saw something that was suspicious in the sky.
Right.
Basically, is it going to last?
I don't know.
Well, we don't know. I mean, depends on different factors. I think number one, possibly, and here's everything is speculation, guys, to everyone listening to. Possibly someone in the Pentagon or a few members in the Pentagon were trying to deal with this serious issue that there are new technologies that are being developed not only by the United States, but also by other factions, Russia, China, that are going to make a lot of us see more weird things in the sky.
Right.
I don't know, for example, this idea of hypersonic missiles, things to that effect. And also what we're saying, that these drone technology would seem to be just at the dawn of it, of the capabilities of drones, things that drones could be able to do. I mean, I guess to the average people say, well, that means that I'm going to be able to buy things on Amazon and a drone is going to deliver it to me. Yeah, sure, maybe, quite possibly. Not only, your new book, but also maybe even a pizza. But the way that our skies are going to be swarming with weird things, maybe this is one way for the Pentagon to deal with this hot potato. But at the same time, obviously, with the UFO phenomenon, the dynamics might change dramatically if the phenomenon, decides to appear itself under a new guise, all of a sudden. I don't know. I mean, we are having all these discussions, all these revelations or limited handouts and all these news about the TSA and the New York Times article and yada, yada, yada. But we're not having it under what we will call a regular UFO flap, at least not to my knowledge. I don't see, although there are articles saying that people did see more, or did report, let's clarify, did report more UFOs in 2020 during the pandemic than on previous years, right, which could be attributed to a number of things. People having more free time, people have being quarantined in their homes, not having to, maybe having more time to look up in the sky, or maybe even, out of desperation, trying to ask, the heavens for guidance, or maybe even, and that's more interesting to me, the idea that during periods of social anxiety, there is an increase in paranormal activity. Right. But regardless of that, I don't see, I haven't yet seen any videos of regular folks showing weird phenomena clustered in a particular geographical area, which is, like the characteristics of a typical UFO flap. So we're having this, it's kind of like a UFO dry hump. Pardon my very crass metaphor here, but this is kind of like we're trying to have this UFO transparency, but the UFOs are not appearing, and what I feel is what we need is if the UFO phenomenon all of a sudden decided to increase or boost this activity, then maybe people will start to act differently. Maybe even regular folk will start to say, "Wait, what's going on?" We demand answers. Right now, there's just, the only ones who are paying attention to all this is, you and I and Seriah and all the weirdos who are interested in UFOs. But I don't see, average citizens worried about this, because average citizens are worried about more pressing matters like staying alive during a
pandemic.
Pandemic, yeah.
Exactly. And being able to feed themselves and pay their bills. I mean, it's interesting you bring up like Amazon home delivery. So this just adds another facet to accessibility for the technology, not necessarily for like you and I as everyday folks, but would it be easier for me, say that I work for a foreign intelligence hacking operation, I'm using some very general terms there, to find the commercial technology that Amazon has reached out to say, to DJI or somebody else, like, can you develop this for us? We're going to use this to send packages out. So I just need to hack DJI. I don't need to hack Amazon or any department of the government. And some of these companies even exist in multiple countries. So again, the ability to pull some of this off is pretty spectacular. And, I do think we're going to see drones swarming the sky. And it's going to be really funny when people find ways to shoot them out of the sky with little, electromagnetic pulses or something like that. I kind of, there's the punk kid in me from when I was 14 and 15 that thought vandalism is great is really looking forward to that.
Or we might see a bigger push towards regulating drones.
Yeah, and that is going to come.
Accessibility by regular citizens to drone technology, like saying, no. You need to have a registered license by the U.S. government to in order to operate a drone. And it will this thing about everybody going to any kind of Radio Shack, Best Buy to get a drone might be a thing of the past. The same, it's like the government's always, when it feels like something is getting out of their hands, they always say, well, we'll just ban it. That'd be drugs, marijuana, whatever. They always say when they still feel fear that something is getting out of their hands, I think their first move is to ban it and to enforce some kind of like sanctions or forces in order to curtail accessibility to private citizens.
So here's what I think that will happen, and my just hypothetically in my head, I could see happening right after that is almost something like the Guardian article about the vanishing swarms of drones, because this stuff is so cheap now. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the little, looks like a little styrofoam airplane that some of the military we use in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places to just do like a general recon. And it's got a little pre-programmed flight path that they can punch in. And because it's a little styrofoam airplane, I mean, it's uses hardly any power. Well, I'm looking at the DIY drone page right now too, and they're showing videos on swarm of drones, multi-vehicle simulation, all these things. Like, I don't know if they can get this back in. So you ban it, but you're still going to have people in their basements that are like, sure, you ban this, but I can get an electric motor or a bunch of electric motors that are light and put one of these together because I can just download the software off the internet. And, the batteries are in everything now. So I've just got to convert a battery somehow.
Sure, but then you have the next 9/11.
Yeah.
That is just not with an airline plane, but with a swarm of drones. Mm-hmm. And then maybe people, regular citizens will say, the government needs to put a stop to all this drone madness.
That's a good point. And that would definitely happen. And that's one of those situations where it kind of reminds me of people that are gunsmiths, where they can manufacture some things and they can't manufacture others. Same thing with people that have 3D printers.
Right.
Where like when you get in trouble because you made something you weren't supposed to that facilitated like a fully automatic weapon, like you're going to jail. And I could definitely see this becoming you just created a weapon of war.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
There's I don't know that they would actually ban drones, though. They might require licenses and stuff like that, but I think that's not going to stop other countries from spying on us with their drones, If anything, they may not even have to hack DJI or whatever. They can just make drones that are just like the Amazon drones.
That's a good point. So it just looks like them too. Yeah.
And people will just be like, oh, it's just an Amazon drone, or that's just a Pizza Hut drone, or whatever, but, and how much, and with the mimicry that the UFO phenomena uses, how many of those things would just be dismissed that people see that actually weren't something normal,
Right.
Well, that's I think that's something that one of those articles mentioned, how UFO reports decreased by 2014 because that's also the time that coincided with drone technology becoming more widespread. So I guess people see something weird in the sky, some blinking lights. The first thing they will assume is that that's a UFO. Well, the first thing they'll assume, that's a drone.
Right. And I know I talked about this on the air before. I saw a drone when I was driving into Geneva one day, and there was something going on the other side of the lake, but I just see this light dropping in a weird way, and I'm like, that's not normal. I'm like, what is that light? And then as I got closer, I went, it's a drone. Okay.
Yeah.
Like my observation was correct. That's not a plane. That's not a normal movement for something. But as soon as I got close enough, I could tell it was moving like a drone, and I was like, oh. And then I got around the side of the lake, and like the whole road is closed off and stuff. I'm like, all right, so someone flew their drone over there to see what was going on.
Right.
And I wrote an article some years ago on Mysterious Universe trying to make the argument that this reaction or wanting to dismiss UFO sightings, no, that probably was a drone, could be problematic because of the current limitations with some or the most common of drones, which are the rotor quadcopters drones, which can only stay airborne for a very, very limited amount of time.
Right.
Because of their characteristics and battery consumption and whatnot. Your regular commercial drone, the best one, something that you could probably get for, $400, $600, can stay airborne for, half an hour,
right.
At the most. And if you're looking at some kind of light that is staying stationary and is maybe moving up and down, and it's probably some kind of like rotary drone. But if that quote unquote drone is staying there for more than half an hour, then things I feel at least get more interesting. Now, I know there are also drones that can stay airborne for a very, very lengthy amount of time. So you can even find drones, very expensive drones, but you can find drones that can stay in the air for almost a day. But those are all other type of drones. They are like what they call the fixed wing configuration. They're basically mini airplanes, right?
Yeah.
And some of those drones can lift off vertically. That's what they call the VTOL fixed wing drones, which have a couple of rotors at the top, so they can take off and land almost vertically. But to my knowledge, those drones are not designed to hover like a helicopter for a lengthy amount of time. They are designed to fly like planes. Maybe fly in circles. But this is when, like I said, things get complicated with people saying, "Oh, well, everything can be explained by drones," and also people not knowing the capabilities of drones. And something that you say from some minutes ago about the idea of these commercial companies being just 10 years behind what the Army can do. Well, we really can't know, can we? I mean, who's to say these guys have not developed something that uses other types of power source? I mean, maybe even something using, like a nuclear battery. Or something that can actually, display in much more impressive ways. I mean, whenever I see all those old videos from the 90s taken by Bob Lazar and whatnot, when I saw them like 30 years later, one of my first reactions was, what if that was some kind of drone that they were testing at Area 51,
So I'm with you on all of this. And, you talk about having something that lingers. And then we brought this up a little bit with Greg Bishop, too, a few weeks ago. You and I were talking about balloons that are used for spying. And Seriah's heard me talk about this, and I apologize because I think I bring it up every time at this point. I think a lot of the black triangles were airships or balloons.
Right.
And unmanned, potentially. Potential in the sense of also having some type of nuclear power on board. Because then you can loiter over an area indefinitely.
Yeah.
And if you remember when they saw these guys over Germany, a lot of times they were finding ponds and drawing water into themselves. There were a couple of odd accounts like that. That always made me think that there was something on board they were trying to cool. And that was why I went back to the nuclear, power side of it.
Nice.
So you have an airship, manned, unmanned, whichever way you want to go, some vectored thrust on there, and, it floats. So you can do some amazing aerial maneuvers. It can stay, loiter over a battlefield, over a place that you're trying to surveil, whatever, for quite a long time. And it can maintain a very, very high altitude. I really think that that's some of what some of the Black Triangle sightings are. The other thing that I've just seen people starting to talk about in the civilian side is using the boomerang style airfoil Zeppelin to carry up a rocket that would launch once the Zeppelin carried it up, very much into the stratosphere. If it gets into the stratosphere, I have to think about how high those things go. But basically, you're saving a whole bunch of money on shooting a rocket from the ground. Instead, you're just letting it float all the way up as high as that balloon will take it, then launching it from there. So there's obviously been development of like, hey, we can arm these things. Or we could use them to launch spy satellites.
True.
Yeah.
One of the other articles I clipped, and I think I talked about this briefly, Has to do with the Navy's missile fooling plasma tech. And
Wow.
it says the aspect of the technology that raises eyebrows is the use of laser-induced plasma filaments to create floating images in the air. According to the patent document, it is possible to generate a 2D or 3D volumetric image in space. This is analogous to rastering of an electron beam in a cathode ray tube-based television. In one potential embodiment, a laser system would be mounted on the back of an air vehicle, such as the beam can be rastered using optics and mirrors to generate a large ghost image in space. This ghost image would appear to detract the hovering missile away from the tangible air vehicle. The patent does not make any mention of using plasma filaments to fool anything other than missile seekers. Having been said, the ability to draw objects in the sky would seemingly account for one aspect of the UFO sightings reported by the U.S. Navy in 2004 and 2014 and 15. It might be possible to draw the tic tacs and spheres encased in a cube cited by the U.S. Navy. Yeah. Other things, however, seem to disqualify plasma filament images as the source of the UFOs. The radar systems of Super Hornet strike fighters, E-2C Hawkeye airborne command and control aircraft, and the guided missile cruiser USS Princeton all reportedly picked up these objects. Plasma, unless it is associated with a physical object, is generally undetectable by radar. Furthermore, the pilots reported seeing solid objects, not ghost images formed by beams of light.
Right. Yeah. And I've seen people making the argument that that is the kind of technology that was tested at Area 51 during the times of Bob Lazar, and that is the thing that he was inviting, people to see during those Wednesday trials. Some kind of like plasma system that will draw or create some kind of things that will move in very peculiar ways.
Right.
So it's either, I don't know. I mean, we're proposing different things. I know, drones or plasma systems, but I think it's good for people to entertain these ideas instead of saying, well, it's either a hoax or it's either, Bob Lazar was telling the truth and the U.S. has a few flying saucers stored in some hangar out there. There's actually other theories to entertain here, people, and that is why the UFO phenomenon is so difficult to try to wrap your head about.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. When I first saw the Bob Lazar stuff, I thought unmanned drones. They weren't a big thing at the time, but I'm like, but who knows what the military has? Well, now we know they had unmanned drones.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, and I don't know I still to this day don't know what to make of Bob Lazar, because he comes across as believable, but yet the story doesn't really seem to hold water. Mm-hmm. And, when I started this show, George Knapp was one of the influences I had on how I did shows. And I find George to be less and less believable as time goes on, because he seems to be associating himself with a lot of this stuff that, I don't know, it just seems questionable, Yeah,
I still have, let me be clear, I still have a lot of respect for Knapp.
So do I.
Knapp, but I really believe that he has put his relationships with some people, like Bob Lazar or Robert Bigelow, has put it before his objectivity as a journalist.
Yeah.
Maybe he's been shown such level of evidence that we haven't been privy to, that has fully convinced him and that has, forced him to be on board with these guys to such an extent, and saying, I'm on team Lazar, I'm on team Bigelow, because you don't know what I've seen. Well, maybe, but unfortunately, we lowly humans, we don't have that luxury. We haven't been invited to Skinwalker Ranch. We haven't been invited to these secret meetings at Bigelow Aerospace. And by the way, this is another thing that is really weird. How before the Pentagon admitted that those images, the most recent ones, were real, or that in the sense that they were taken by Navy personnel. Knapp alluded that he had seen them at the Bigelow's headquarters, during a secret meeting. And it begs the question, how is it that Mr. Robert Bigelow has access to this kind of evidence, before elected members of Congress in the United States? What's the deal here? Isn't supposed to that his contract with the Pentagon was finished in 2012? Why is it that he still has such access to this kind of evidence? I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of like rumor among Navy personnel. Say, hey, dude, if you ever get a cool pic of a UFO, I know a guy who will pay a pretty penny for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And here I'm close to defamation with this such speculation. So maybe I'll have to be very careful to. But it's what I'm saying is weird. It's weird that Bigelow had access to these materials or to this information before anyone else, and few people are asking why.
Yeah, it may just be a simple matter of he had the right relationships that carried on. I don't know. Talking about the plasma tech, it reminds me so much of all the conspiracies around Project Bluebeam from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It is that technology that they said they were going to use to, or it's a perfect example of what that technology might look like. On the drone front, I think Annie Jacobson's book on the Area 51 talks about some of the first drones that the military used was to fly a aircraft through a mushroom cloud of a nuclear test. And this was very simple. They would have the radio controls on the aircraft carrier, and they would fly the plane through the cloud. And I don't think they even landed the thing. I think they just let it, crash and just recover the filters that they were flying through the cloud to see how much radioactivity was in the cloud.
Right.
But so that tells you how long the military has been messing around with drone technology, though, because that's the 50s,
Yeah. Well, not
another technology. Sorry, another technology that we haven't mentioned and that they have been toying with for many, many years is something that mentioned by Rogoway in his articles that is called palladium. That is some kind of technology that is designed to trick enemy radars to see targets that are not really there, right? And I think that that also kind of like puts into question the radar tracking that was occurring during the USS Nimitz UFO sightings in 2004. This idea of saying, the radar operators were seeing the UFOs descend from, 80,000 feet to 40,000 feet almost instantly. And that's where we're saying, that's clearly technology that human, aircraft are incapable of. Yes, that's certainly a possibility, but we also have to entertain the possibility that, maybe that's technology that was only tricking the radar systems of these American vessels into thinking that the objects were descending at such impossible, speeds.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I mean, if you fired that out of something, and then also created the image over it with the plasma tech there, I'm going to call it a plasma projector. That's not the right term, but you could certainly create the effect that you're talking about.
Well, here's the other thing, though. That plasma tech is what they're acknowledging having right now.
Right.
So again, how much more advanced are they with this tech that they're not talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's crazy. I mean, I'm just thinking about seeing like a C-130 in the sky, and then there is a decoy projection of a C-130 in the sky, 50 yards over from it.
Yeah.
And there's something that's causing a massive radar hit in there too. So I would be drawn towards the decoy as opposed to the actual. I mean, and maybe they don't scale it that way, but still, that's just incredible.
One thing's for sure is that with this thing that ever since 2017, it feels like we are moving one step forward, two steps behind with all of these.
Yeah.
Before Corbell and his pyramids and George Knapp and the new balloons, all the UFO community was talking about is about alien alloys, recovered physical samples of UFO crashes. Nobody's talking about that now because we're back to the idea of, well, maybe these are drones, maybe these are some kind of like man-made tech. And I can't help thinking that this is by design, that this obfuscation and this confusion. And I've said it numerous times. These videos that have been promoted by these individuals and TTSA when TTSA existed, because we haven't talked about the fact that TTSA, is no more. But these videos are so crappy and so short, in length, and so grainy in definition. I really feel that they were deliberately edited to be ambiguous and to say, well, that could be anything. The only reason that we give a damn about the TikTok video is because of the testimony of Commander Fravor, who said, well, I saw the thing and it was incredible. And it was, I think, technology that was not of this earth, because the guy is a UFO believer. And when we hear that, even Joe Rogan pays attention, and that tells you something. But the evidence by itself, doesn't really impact anyone, and these new videos, which Corbell says that is the best military based UFO videos that people have ever seen, are pure crap. The pyramid is horrible. It is like, that could be anything, and I feel that there is a reason for this ambiguity. I don't know why.
It doesn't really take us in any one direction. I mean, what would it take to what would be convincing evidence of a non human construct? It's
a good question, Seriah.
Yeah. I mean, like when you talk about cryptids, it's basically a body, like you would need the body of a Bigfoot that people were free to analyze, like actual scientists could sit down and analyze, or a captured Bigfoot. It doesn't have to be a dead Bigfoot, but it would have to be a physical thing. No amount of pictures, videos, or anything nowadays is convincing enough because it's too easy to fake. And so when you're looking at these videos look awful. These don't even look like good videos. And it's like, well, okay, let's assume they're not fake, but there's so many things they could be. In order to say that this is genuinely anomalous, something that is not human made, I feel like we would need it. And it would have to be open to scientists to examine and say, yes, this is not something we could have made. And even then, what do corporations and deep state government people have that they're not telling people, so that a regular scientist may not think we could make it, but we can. It's like it's so hard to see if we're dealing with something anomalous anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I became interested in the UFO world in a large part because of the photographic the photographs of Edward Billy Mayer, right? You know, the Swiss contactee and his Palladium beam ships. So if Jeremy Corbell were to be showing something that was like 10 times more impressive than that, I will say, wow, you know, that is interesting. But like you said, you know, that will still leave me with some kind of like nagging suspicion that, but what it could if it was faked somehow? Because if you know, if Hollywood has, or even, you know, some kid using, you know, standard computer tech, that's a way to deep fake the face of Gal Gadot in a porn video.
Yeah.
You know, faking a UFO landing is way easier.
Yes.
So yeah, like you said, photographic video evidence is pretty much useless. We will need something more. And I don't know what that is. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people out there who think we're just debunking the whole UFO thing. I firmly believe there is a very real phenomena. But I don't think it's the government that... See, to me, it's the personal experiences. Like, this is a personal thing. It's not the government needs to tell you it's real thing. If you've had an encounter with this stuff, you know it's real. And that's that, you know, like you've had that experience. It seems to work on a personal level. And it doesn't really matter if the government says it's real or not, because they're not a part of the equation as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree with that 100%. Speaking, just jumping back, Seriah, I'm sorry if I'm taking us off topic or back to earlier, but, you know, Red Pill, you said that comment about, you know, 2015, we were all talking about parts of the UFO, and that made me think of American Cosmic. And
right.
How many of those folks were business people that were wrapped up in the search for, you know, alloys and what have you, and had sort of like, well, I guess you could call it a contactee experience as well. But it does seem like the conversation did get shifted. But it also to both of your points about it would be very easy to make a video of a moon or of a moon landing. Excuse me. Yeah, that too. But anyway, to make a you know, look like a landing had occurred somewhere, you know, very clearly. And so I almost wonder if this is, I'm very fascinated by how corporations function, how big business functions. If maybe this didn't get pushed by a military side of things, but maybe some of the disinformation of this, if it is disinformation and utilization, got pushed more from a corporate business side of things. I have no angle on that for why that could be, other than to stop the conversation around potential artifacts from you know, an alien crash or something like that. But it just made me think about the figures that were involved. Seem to be quite wealthy and established businessmen in different ways. Of course, Bigelow's part of that too.
Yeah,
but
there was a case, and Red Pill, maybe you remember which one this is. It was a family. They saw something come down in the woods next to their house. They went out. There was a white circle where they saw the thing land, and nothing grew there. It had like drained it was like all salt or something like that. Basically salted the earth where it landed. And the woman touched the ring, the white ring that was on the ground, and she lost all feeling in her arm for the rest of her life.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, when you get something like that, to me, that's like, okay, that's convincing, because we don't have anything that, and even today, this was, you know, decades ago, we still don't have anything that would do something like that. That's such an anomalous sort of effect, you know?
Mm-hmm. 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 I always think that the oddity and the personal aspect of the, I don't even want to call it a UFO experience, but just the anomalous something in the sky. I don't know, you know, you're talking about how it's between you and the person. And, what role does the government have in that? I just don't even know how they can have disclosure about that anyway. I know the listeners of the show would understand that, this may be something that's very abstract for us to put into words. But I don't know if the government would even be able to tell us, like, okay, strange things happen. Reality is weird.
Right.
And yeah, to me, the most interesting thing about the UFO phenomenon is the transformational potential of it.
Yes.
How it manages to touch people in such dramatic and lasting ways, not just about trauma, but also sometimes, that people triggering the phenomenon triggering in people psychic manifestations, poltergeists, or maybe even artistic capabilities that they had never shown before, and that's when you say, well, there's something there. But having said that, lately I've been thinking, well, what if you could get all of that, the psychic potential and the personality transformation with a bogus UFO event? Can you fake a UFO sighting and still get people to get transformed as if it was a genuine sighting? I mean, whence does the power come? Does it come from the light in the sky, or does it come from within, just triggered by someone being confronted by something that is so amazing that it crushes your model of reality, and out of that you get transformed, but the power was within you all along. It's like when you hear stories, and there's plenty of that in the record about some guy who get into a car crash or was attacked by some thugs and get beaten up with a baseball bat in the head repeatedly, and after that, after they recover, they become musical or mathematical savants.
Yes.
Does that mean that the bat had some kind of magical properties? No.
Right.
But the trauma itself elicited the transformation in the person. So maybe you'll say, well, the trauma can come from anything. You can come from a beating with a bat, from a car crash, a near-death experience, a true UFO sighting, or maybe even a fake UFO sighting. I don't know. This is the kind of things that I'm battling with currently.
Well, with near-death experiences, plenty of people die and are brought back without having a near-death experience, and they don't go through the transformative things that people who have near-death experiences do. They may clean up their life or something, but like a near-death experience oftentimes will completely transform somebody. And it will. I think the stuff is in there. I think that is a trigger event to wake someone up that maybe is not on the right path, or maybe this was an experience that they needed to have.
So I've been toying with this idea around language. I studied linguistics. Let me rephrase that. I took a class in linguistics when I studied anthropology in college. But I always think of language, as I've gotten older, as having certain aspects of it that are a trap. Because it forces you to like hammer things into words.
Yes.
And there's also a part of that means that you are putting reality into your ability to make a sound out of it.
Right.
I know this sounds kind of goofy, but so say you have that experience, whether it's real or it's faked, but it breaks your perception of reality. So you're breaking that process in your mind,
right?
Because there's that language of reality. And so now the possibility of you being psychic in some way, being able to pick up on other information, interpret, whatever, becomes more accessible to you because you've kind of broken out of this pattern of language and the language of reality.
Right. I love that. I mean, it's something that I think about when some people say that one of the best defenses against alien abduction is to invoke the name of Jesus Christ, right? And you hear that among the people who attribute some kind of like demonic origin to the UFO phenomenon. But sometimes I think, well, maybe it works not because of some kind of like a special agency in the name of this great religious leader, but maybe it's because you somehow by invoking the name of Jesus Christ or Voltron or Elvis or whatever, you are forcing your brain or your mind back into a some kind of like language setting in which like short circuits the experience. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're changing the definition of what's going on.
Yeah.
By the way, I have Voltron about 10 feet from me.
Of course you do.
Our Lord and Savior.
We have a little office in the house, and I have some of my robots and movie memorabilia in here. So there's an Infra Man poster behind me, and Voltron's across from the shelf. But I think there's a lot to that. So, Red Pill, I'm completely agnostic, but I grew up in the Deep South. And so, I grew up with Caucasian Jesus statues everywhere in the church and things like that. And I've only told this story a few times, but since nobody knows who I am, I don't mind sharing it. When my dad passed away, I fell asleep on the couch, a day or two after, because we'd been up trying to deal with everything as those things can happen. This is 20 years ago too. And I woke up on the couch and Jesus was standing out on the sidewalk in front of our house in this sort of like waking dream I was in. And he was also Caucasian Jesus, looked like the typical statue that you see and what have you. And so I walked out and I met him. We didn't say anything. It was an incredibly overwhelming experience because all I could do was cry around him because it was like stress had been taken off of my body. And he walked inside, and I knew he was going in to let my dad's spirit go on or something like that. And then I woke up back on the couch. But it was, I shouldn't have thought of that. And, just being such a history buff and other things, I don't think Jesus was a blonde guy,
right.
But that's the program that's in my head.
Yeah.
That's deep seated in my culture that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And like American gods, do we bring some of this stuff to life through belief?
Oh, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I have P.M.H. Atwater on the show probably after this. But her latest book, which I'm trying to remember the name of, is about near-death experiences with children. And quite a number of them saw Jesus, even if they didn't know who Jesus was.
Oh, wow.
And some of them saw other, it was like 50% saw Jesus or something like that, even if it wasn't a cultural norm for them. And the two things I wonder the thing she doesn't detail in the book is a lot of these people, she's talking to them when they're in their 60s or 70s, and they had near-death experiences when they were 2. And it had a very strong impact on their life. But I'm also wondering, did they actually identify that being as Jesus when they were 2?
Right.
Or over time, did it become Jesus, A? And B, is there really a tulpa effect going on where, we sometimes will encounter these things even without knowing about them? How much actual life do these things have? And I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who are Christian who are cringing right now, but the original texts of Christianity do not make Jesus a divine being. That was added later by the church.
Sure.
And and I don't, maybe we're totally wrong about that. But that's from my research, that seems to be the case, that they took him and he never claimed to be divine until the church decided he was divine.
Right.
You know, there's...
go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, so I have an odd aside to that. I'll see if I can find the author of this book. But being the comic book guy that I am, there was a writer of Superman who got very into a lot of Buddhism and things like that. And he swore later in his life that he met Clark Kent as a tulpa.
Right.
And there is a book about it. I'm trying to remember the name. It may be called like Meeting Superman or something like that. I'll see if I can find it. But he said he's met him twice. But the one I remember a little bit more explicitly was like Clark Kent got into a taxi with him and they visited. It was just one of those random kind of like crazy things. But the book was really just about his experiences going down this particular belief system. And he believed that his teacher was also a tulpa that was, quite old. Like you'll hear quite a bit in a lot of different with more like yogis and things like that from India. But let me see if I can look it up, and I'll just mention the name so people know what I'm talking about. But I thought it was fascinating that it was a character that we know is completely fictional,
right?
That he thought he had met.
And this is common, right? I mean, Alan Moore, the famous British comics writer and author, has also said that he met his own character, John Constantine.
Yes.
The figure of the main character of the Hellblazer series. That was also the inspiration for Keanu Reeves' movie, John Constantine. He met the character at least twice in his life.
Yeah.
So that really gives credence to the idea of, either the guy was in some kind of altered state of consciousness, or maybe, tulpas or fictional characters gain so much energy from their creators that they gain a life of their own. Now, getting back to the idea of children having near-death experiences, I was wondering, Seriah, I mean, were there any reports from children meeting, figures like Santa Claus instead of Jesus?
If I remember right, yeah. I don't know if it was Santa Claus, but some of them did meet fictional cartoon character type creature.
Interesting.
Some of them just met God, and they couldn't really describe it better than that.
Oh, real quick. The book is called An Unlikely Prophet, a metaphysical memoir by the legendary writer of Superman and Batman.
Nice.
The author is Alvin Schwartz.
Okay.
I'm sure that book is mentioned or quoted in Jeffrey Kripal's Mutants and Mystics.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. The Alan Moore stuff is just awesome to me, by the way. I know those two stories really well about Constantine. With the children having near-death experiences, this is just a connection. It's not a direct near-death thing, but the stories about young children having experiences with like Muppets coming into their rooms.
Yeah.
Right.
Things like that. That's what that made me think of. And that would have terrified me when I was 2. So,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that I'm probably going to air that interview after this one, since this one's a little more timely. But she's done some really interesting work with that. Like I said, my only criticism of the book is she doesn't specify, and I guess it's hard to some of it's recovered through hypnosis, I'm pretty sure, because she mentions it once or twice, which kind of makes it kind of questionable. But even if they remember it clearly, and I think she told me that most of them remember it very clearly throughout their entire life, you still have to wonder how much post near-death experience has colored how they interpret that experience later in life.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they met a being of light, that maybe looked Jesus-like or whatever. And then later it's like, oh, that was Jesus. She states that they say flat out, I met Jesus.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had a family member that was very involved in the LDS church. And let me say right now, I don't want to offend anybody for their faith or anything like that. And if I do, I apologize, because everyone's faith is important, and
yes,
we need those things to get through the world. But he thought that he had, I can't remember if he thought it was an angel that would come talk to him, like sit on the edge of his bed and talk to him at night periodically. And he was quite older. But it was a glowing yellow being. And his frame of reference for that was like, this is like Moroni. And I don't actually think he thought it was Moroni, but an angel from the LDS, kind of, I would say, Parthenon of angels that you hear more about there than other places.
Right.
That would come to visit him like once or twice a year and tell him what to do in the church, and, when he should move out to Utah and things like that. And that's what he did. And he was quite happy with that. But to me, it reminded me a lot of, just general contactee experiences and abductee experiences in a lot of ways. They just didn't take him anywhere else.
Yeah.
Well, there's the story of Joseph Firmage, right? This guy who was one of the whiz kids of the first internet boom in the early 90s. He was a guy who at a very young age managed to I don't know, win $10 million or something like that. I guess by today's standards, that's laughable. But that was very impressive. And then the guy decided to invest most of his time and assets trying to investigate UFOs. And then the reason behind this is because he had also that kind of experience, an experience with a tall being of light that appeared on his bedroom. And this story is quite interesting because in the way he related to it, the being was kind of angry or annoyed, and he said, "Why have you summoned me?
Interesting."
and Joe Firmage answered, "Because I want to travel to space." And the being asked, what makes you think that you are worthy of such a thing? And Joe Firmage said, because I will gladly give my life for it. And then out of this being came some kind of a globe of light, which is also very common in close encounter experiences, that from his hand traveled and kind of came inside the chest of Joe Firmage, right? So, and Joe Firmage is his father was a Mormon, and the father told him that he himself, when he was younger, had a similar experience. So it makes you think. Well, it's not that I believe that Joseph Smith, when he said that he met the angel Moroni, but I think there's something there, that there was some real core experience that was the origin of this religion.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I agree.
We're just about out of time for this segment, but let's continue on a Patreon, and we'll talk a little about fishing too.
Okay, that sounds great.
and yes, I'm serious, but it'll relate. You'll understand. So thank you both. Red Pill, where can people find your stuff?
They can find my stuff mainly at the Daily Grail, www.dailygrail.com, and we also have a Patreon support. If you can support us, that will be greatly appreciated, because that's the only way that we can manage to stay afloat. And I also have my own personal webpage, absurdbydesign.com, which something of an art gallery of sorts. And there you can also try to contact me if you want to hire my services for, an art commission, maybe some design project that you have in mind. You can find me there.
Perfect. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Gracias.
So here I want to thank all of my Patreons. Without you, this show would probably not be a reality. But I especially want to thank those who are pledging $10 or more. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Eric Curvin, Tim, Ad Noctum, Patricia Gaia Quinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andy McNamara, Barbara Fisher, Becky Trainer, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limita, Charles Davis, Chris Ernst, Craig Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Dominic O'Malley, Edu Camahort, Empty K, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Janet Bunderson, Jennifer Campbell, Joanna Rojas, Jose A., Carla Mahoney, Kevin, The 100th Monkey Project, Kevin Schreck, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Jim and Sophie, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matthew Sproul, Maddie, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sheeron, Sedgter, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor, 36 Dingo, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Powell, William Lovelace, and Stephen D. Thank you all so much for your support. If you enjoyed that conversation, we continue it on a Patreon segment that I think is actually longer than this show was. So if you want to become a patron, it's only $3 a month, and it helps us out a great deal to keep this show going. And you get extra content with almost every show. So I think for the $3, you're definitely getting your money's worth. And like I said, it helps us keep going with this. So wheredidtheroadgo.com, there's a link for that, for Patreon right on there. There's a link for our Discord. There's a link for our Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit, pretty much everything. You can find it there, our YouTube, Vimeo, I don't even remember what else. There's a lot of stuff there. And you can listen to every show all the way back to the very first one. There's also a link to our merchandise. We have a number of designs, 2 by the late Jeff Ritzman and 3 by Timothy Renner, I think, are all up in our store at wheretheroadgo.com. And you can get them on t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, posters, all kinds of stuff. And they're very, very good quality. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.